Hi, I'm Steve Plach, and I'll be your host for this evening's program. So we should just act natural. Yeah? Hi, I'm Steve Plach, and I'll be your host for this episode of Voices from the Village. As you know, Voices is the premier live call-in talk show on community television and has been so for 16 years. One of the people that has made this possible, and in fact primarily made it possible, is Charlie Phillips. Charlie is ill this evening. He's at home, and so we're sending our best wishes to him, and we'd like to show just a short clip of Charlie at his finest in his reporting days in Seattle during the protest. So we see that, and then we'll get started with our program and talk about the very important issues of the UCSC Highway 6 and the issues surrounding the demonstration and protest. So let's go ahead and see that.
Up with a little clip tonight that I think expresses a bit of who we are and who we hope to be here and at community television. This is a clip of our executive producer when he's doing some Voices on the Street work in Seattle in 1999. Some of the folks who might follow the anti-corporate globalization movements and the protests against the WTO and kind of corporate globalization will have heard about the amazing protests in Seattle of 1999 in November 30th, I believe, is when they kicked off. And yeah, we're just going to cut straight to this clip of Charlie getting down in the streets of Seattle.
Charlie Phillips with Voices from the Village, Channel 71, Santa Cruz. We're here at the Seattle Community College protest, the WTOs, on the day of the 2nd of December.
Rubber bullets if they're not shooting at us? They might have pepper spray and tear gas on them.
Oh, thank you.
I think we have started a peaceful revolution. I think we will eventually have peace. That's where I think it's going to.
Charlie Phillips with Voices from the Village.
Say again, sir?
Charles Phillips with Voices from the Village, Channel 71 Community TV, Santa Cruz.
Oh,
So you feel justice is not being served in labor because of the WTO, right?
right. I mean, the
introduce that
WTO
just like
uses
that.
labor to make all its profits. Who does the work? You know, in some of these third world countries, it's the kids. You know, and that's one of my biggest hang-ups is watching all these kids work in sweatshops. You know,
Perfect.
Forced to do labor, forced to not go to school, have their dreams, if they even have any dreams, turn into nightmares because somebody is trying to make a profit off of their labor.
She's off to the right side.
This is what democracy looks like! This is what democracy looks like!
None of it. It's not Charlie. Yes.
What have you seen of the action at the protest?
I took part of a nonviolent protest that was in an intersection with about 150 to 200 people. It was completely nonviolent. We were chanting, and we sat down in the intersection, and with basically no warning, maybe 30 seconds, the police fired at us with rubber bullets at point-blank range. People were sitting on the street. The police stood over on top of them and fired right into them with their guns, with their rifles. They then also pepper sprayed them right in the face and tear gassed the crowd and continued to fire on them with rubber bullets until the crowd dispersed, and then they let about 15 delegates through the intersection.
Yeah, it's not Charlie. Well, let's get to it then.
How have you found the police reacting to the protest today? They have reacted with tear gas without provocation, and they've shown a military presence that's completely contrary to democratic principles, and they are basically protecting the interests of the corporate state.
We have heard that the police fired rubber bullets. Do you have any information about that?
Not to the best of my knowledge. I was hit with both tear gas and pepper spray, completely unprovoked.
Joe Grossman from Voices of the Village here in Seattle in the midst of the protest. Things have calmed down for a few minutes here. There has been tear gas used today. The protesters are holding the line. The police are behind him. We'll be covering the events here today.
Would I like to say something? Well, I think the WTO is the most undemocratic institution that has ever been created. An international undemocratic institution. And it's up to us to do something about it.
Hi. Can you speak to the media?
Step back, please.
I guess that's what time we're supposed to go.
No, this way. Pardon, let's go.
Have you heard that rubber bullets were used?
Yeah, I've got one in my pocket. Sure. They were firing the...
Police announcing again, please leave the area.
Whole world. Voices from the Village, Channel 71 Community TV, here at the site of the WTO protest.
The whole world is watching! The whole world is watching! The whole world is watching! The whole world is watching!
Before they used rubber bullets and tear gas and pepper spray on people. So we're really frightened that they're going to do that again right now.
Get that man, get that man. Totally unprovoked use of force, totally unprovoked use of force, totally unprovoked use of tear gas by the police. They are firing without cause.
Got tear gas in our eyes here.
The police are advancing. The police are advancing without cause. Get that.
Wait, Joe!
Help! Tear gas!
Where's the fucking Joe? God damn it! Who's got the mic? Give me that fucking thing. Let go of that fucking. Give me that fucking thing.
God damn it!
Make a statement.
We've been it was unprovoked, this tear gas, and it's been in the midst of the crowd. There's only civil disobedience here. Channel 71, Voices from the Village, Charlie Phillips.
And certainly it's appropriate to have a clip of that level of activism, because I think it really exemplifies what my guests tonight, really their level of commitment. So Charlie, get well, come back to us soon. Our subject tonight really is UCSC Highway 6 action and issues. I think that for the community, the action has been elevated over the issues, and I think that tonight is an opportunity to really talk about the issues, talk about the issues that arise at UCSC that are important to our community and nationally. And we're fortunate to have 5 students here who really have committed themselves to that work. Let me introduce Ethan Pizzolo. Ethan, welcome. Lori Nixon, Sophia DeMatteo, Rosa Peterson, and Janine Caceres. Welcome, all of you. Let's get just a little bit of biographical information from each of you, and then we'll start in with the discussion about the issues. Ethan?
So I'm a second-year student at UCSC. I'm currently majoring in history and minoring in history of consciousness. I suppose, through my education, I've learned that theory and praxis are inseparable by nature, and through learning about some objective some objective truths that exist in the world, I've learned that it's people who are aware. It's their responsibility to take action against those injustices.
Absolutely, Lori. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Well, I'm from San Diego, and I grew up in one of the best school districts in California. I feel really lucky for that, and was really exposed to environmental activism. I would say was my first really forte, you know, my first push into doing something that was bigger than myself. And as I got into high school, I started learning more about human rights and poverty and racism, you know, queer rights. And as I've moved forward in my life, I've taken more action, you know, based around, you know, feminism and sexual assault, and I feel really happy with the impact that everyone is speaking up and taking charge on our future.
Yeah, and I think that is very important. Sophia, welcome.
Hey, I'm also a second-year student at UCSC, and I'm studying art and politics. And yeah, I mean, I think what Ethan says just hits it right on the head, that theory and praxis are just inseparable, and it's, you know, up to people who recognize injustice to stand up and fight that.
Absolutely. Rosa, welcome to you.
Hi. I'm also a student at UC Santa Cruz. I major in feminist studies, and yeah, I mean, I've been involved in, you know, activism through a Jewish youth group I was in, through I was in an activist dance company in high school, and so this has been something that's been very important to me, is understanding how I can take what I understand about the world and use that to address injustice and to fight against it and to fight for justice.
Welcome to you.
Hi. I'm a third-year student at UC Santa Cruz studying politics and environmental studies. I grew up in Los Angeles, and you know, just grew up witnessing several just instances of oppression of very marginalized people, and I think, you know, it is mine and everyone else's responsibility to fight the systems and institutions that perpetuate those oppressions.
Yes, and I completely agree. So the background of this is, of course, that on March 3rd, 6 UCSC students blocked the highway at the Fishhook 17 and 1. And this was a political action. This was a protest against outrageous fee hikes for the UCSC system, amongst many problems, in not only in our community, but in our country. So I want to remind everybody that this is a call-in show, 425-8848, extension 30, 425-8848, extension 30. Please call in, and you can address any of your questions to our panelists. I will also mention that Alexander Pierce is not here, so a shout out to him, the sixth member who couldn't be here. So Alexander, Xander, I hope you're doing well. And also we have an in-studio microphone, so there are many guests here. You can see, if we can pan over to the audience, we have many supporters here of the Highway 6, appropriately so, I think, for a discussion of these very important issues. So I kind of gave it a backdrop of what people understand about the action itself. So why don't we talk about, you know, how that plays into recent movement of police violence, Ferguson, Baltimore, and really the national issues I think this really speaks to. Either?
Yeah, so in terms of our connection, or the UC Santa Cruz connection that we're making between police violence and tuition hikes, I think maybe at face value that connection is a little abstract, but when you really get to the heart of it, you know, our government is simply putting way too much emphasis on incarceration and police, and actively decreasing, especially, I mean, California, obviously, decreasing funding and support of higher education. So the connection is very real on multiple levels of, you know, just suppression being outweighed over education.
And I do want this to be a free-form discussion here. We're not going to, you know, call on people in turn, anything like that. You know, you have something you want to say about these issues as we come to each issue and topic. Feel free to speak up, and let's have a discussion. Rosa?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing, when you have the state of California, when you have the state spending 7 times as much per prison inmate as it does per student, that speaks a lot to where the priorities are of the state. And so when tuition gets raised, and more and more students of color and poor students are unable to attend school. They're pushed towards towards the prison system, and towards increasing criminalization.
Right.
I mean, people, a lot of people have talked a lot about the school to prison pipeline and how
Of course,
people are pushed out of school and into prison. So that was a lot of, I think, our understanding of how the fight against the tuition hikes that we are facing is very, very related to the recent movement against, or I mean, recent and also ongoing movement against police violence and against levels of incarceration that happen in this country.
Sophia?
Yeah, and in fact, these issues are really inseparable. Just as you kind of mentioned, low-income students and students of color are affected mostly by these tuition hikes. So again, there's another connection.
Yeah, down in San Diego, where I used to live and work, my program was cut from the San Diego Unified School District, and most of the children that I worked with came from low-income communities. And watching firsthand these programs be robbed from these students who desperately need support is heartbreaking. And it's hard to watch it. It's hard to watch other students not have the same opportunities that we've been given. And it's really important to know that the neighborhoods where all of these, tragedies are happening is coming from these systematic policies that are robbing neighborhoods of their wealth, robbing these children of opportunities to grow in a community where they're taken care of. From the bottom line, students are being failed across the country by public education funding, being slashed across the board, and more money being spent for police and prisons.
Janine, you have a comment on that?
I think, most of what I would have to say just resonates with everything that everyone else already said,
Well, certainly, I wish we had, 2 or 3 hours to talk about this, but people should know that if they have questions for you, they want to find out more about what you really believe, your positions, and the substantive work you're really doing in all these areas, they can always go to ucschighway6@gmail.com. As I understand it, you can field some questions there, and people can find out much, much more about really the depth, of your commitment to these various issues. Let's move on. Let me ask you about how the state and the university have responded to your action. Certainly, you were having problems you've lost housing, healthcare, education. You've had parallel court cases, which we won't go into necessarily. But just from your perspective, how has the state and particularly university responded to this action and your commitment to really bring these issues to the fore?
Before we were even booked in jail, the UCPD officer came and gave us our suspension letter. So upon our release from jail, we 4 of us found ourselves immediately homeless. We were all also, and still are not allowed to go to campus. So that has denied us access for most of us to housing, to food, healthcare. We cannot go to the health center on campus. And of course, our education as well, which is something we all really value.
And I'd just like to add, this suspension, it's called an interim suspension, and really this is only used in emergency situations. And just going through the student code of conduct and previous uses of this, usually they're used when someone has murdered someone or under really urgent violent situations have people been issued this interim suspension. So obviously our action was nonviolent in nature, so I just wanted to point out the contradiction there.
And the interim suspension is also designed to be a short-term measure, but we've now been on interim suspension for months. And as we've been going through a process where the university, they say in the code of conduct that they're affording us due process, but often, we were having to have meetings where we were defending ourselves without access to a lawyer, for some of us actually when we were, facing criminal charges, but before we had even been assigned a lawyer by the court. And so, there's been a lot of, violations of due process and of legal of our constitutional rights to a lawyer and against self-incrimination. And so, definitely this whole process has been very retaliatory on the part of the university.
You know, it's one of the things that struck me in my kind of engagement with all of you, and being as supportive as I personally can be. I'm supposed to be nonpartisan as a host, but frankly I cannot be, you know, because I am entirely in support of all the things that you're trying to do in terms of fighting the tuition hikes, fighting the selective application of the student conduct code on campus, which we might talk about, of all the things that you really have elevated the public debate about. And I think that's extremely important, so this is an opportunity for us to all discuss that together. I know, Janine, you've spoken articulately, and I think, about how the student conduct code has been selectively enforced against you, and yet not on people who have been sexual predators on campus.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, upon investigating and upon examining cases of sexual assault, we have seen that people who commit hate crimes or violent crimes on campus are usually protected by the judicial process of the university. Meanwhile, anyone who can be targeted for political activism or dissent of any manner is repressed by the university. And I think, you know, I wanted to add to what everyone was saying about the suspension that has been imposed. We have not been formally given sanctions. However, anytime we go through a process of appealing or going to a board hearing, this state suspension keeps being tacked at the end of our sanctions. And this suspension means that once we return to the university, we are immediately eligible for expulsion if we're found in violation of any sort of code of student conduct violation. If we're found in violation of any section of the code of student conduct. And I'd also like to talk a little bit more about how we're facing repression from the state. You know, we spent a few days in jail and are going to also have to possibly do a few days of
community service?
No, house arrest.
House arrest?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
essentially more jail time.
Or more jail time, depending. So, you know, we're definitely being repressed and attacked.
Yeah. And really hold that thought, because there is an overarching issue of repression of students' rights to speak out and exercise their First Amendment rights, and I think that's something that we really do need to discuss. We do have a question from the audience. Yeah?
Hi, my name is Brent. I'm actually facing charges for building takeover Santa Cruz, 75 River Street. So I had a lot of intention being a part of that. I can't discuss much of it, but this is not being viewed, really broadcast to specifically UCSC. And there's a Santa Cruz highway that you had taken shut down, and this is a community television, Santa Cruz. And I wondered, playing the devil's advocate, if you were going to tell the residents of Santa Cruz right now what your intention was and how you could express to them about shutting that highway down for that length of time. I don't mean to put that all on you and all of the ramifications. I'm not saying your responsibility for that. But what would you say to the people of Santa Cruz?
I believe the intention was to bring the issues away from the campus and away from the students and down back into the community, and just really get the community involved, and just to circulate this information so that people are more aware of it, especially not the people who are directly affected by it, being us, the students.
Yeah, I think our political message is very important. Can be summed up easily as a protest against tuition hikes and police violence, and that it was very important to us that our message reach a larger audience, not just the campus.
Which I think that it did, and it's an opportunity here to talk about the larger historical context. Certainly fee hikes in the UCSC system are not a new thing. And they've been increasing your tuition fees for many, many years. There have been other actions that have taken place on UCSC, for instance. They've shut down the campus on a couple of occasions in the past couple of years, as I know. And yet this action was viewed as somehow extreme in bringing the message of concern about practices and policies at UCSC. And I think that's something that we need to address in terms of the whole historical context of fee hikes.
Absolutely. I think it's a very important issue to involve the entire Santa Cruz community in, because it's very easy to get caught up in our lives, you know, going to work every day, got to pick up the kids, got to make dinner every day, and it's really hard to think about how all these bigger issues affect us on a daily basis, but they do. We're all involved in this whole big world that we're living in, and it's very important that every single day we're asking ourselves, what is going on and how am I playing a role in this? And I think it's, you know, it's upsetting to me to hear a lot of people say that, you know, we should have just done it on campus. I am so proud of all of our fellow student activists that are with us now and have come before us and have done so many things on campus. Specifically just this year, there have been, you know, actions, rallies, there was a shutdown of Quarry Plaza, there's been die-ins, there's been, you know, vigils. There's been a lot of action being taken on campus, and a lot of that really does not get much attention down in the local community. And bringing the 96 hours of action, the larger context to campuses all across the state was a really important thing to do. And we are very, very committed to making sure that people are still talking about this.
And I mean, with regards to the, you know, when you know, the UC Santa Cruz was founded, when the UC system was founded, you know, tuition was free. And since then, you know, tuition has been steadily increased, and this is part of how, you know, the UC stays solvent as they take out loans from companies, and the companies know that they can pay them back because they take out the loans to build buildings and to expand, which is something that the UC is you know, continuing to try to do, and to you know, cut down more trees and build more build a larger campus so they can have more students.
Right.
And they, you know, are continually trying to expand and, you know, make more money. And so they take out loans to do that. And the people who lend them money know that they can pay them back, because they know that if they ever run out of money, they'll just raise tuition again. And that's what's been happening continually, is just these tuition increases that happen, you know, every few years. And they, you know, there's this most recent one, which was, thankfully we can get into that later, frozen for 2 years. You know, was framed as, you know, 5% over 5 years, which, you know, is this, oh, well, it's just 5%, you know, and each year it's just 5%, so it's just going to be a little increase, but over time it adds up, and suddenly you have, you know, you're paying like over $30,000 a year to go to school, and it's just not affordable for most people.
It reminds me somewhat of taking away your rights little by little. You know, so we're just taking away a little of your rights today, so don't worry about it. And then take away a little more tomorrow, and before you know it, you know, they've taken away all your rights. But I wanted to get back to kind of what Janine was talking about this, the movement, the anti-repression movement for, you know, students, and I think that's a broad context that really needs to be addressed.
Yeah, well, there has been one action that was organized on campus specifically against sexual assault and against political repression on campus. And the point of this was, again, to highlight the contradiction that this judicial process is able to prosecute and repress student activism, and not violent and violent, sexual predators of sexual predators and like violent offenders on campus. And several students showed up to this action, and I mean, there's definitely lots of support from the student population.
And I think, as a matter of fact, we have a clip of that Stevenson Hall demonstration, which I was fortunate enough to be a part of. Maybe we can, to Stevenson Dining Hall, maybe we can show that now. We can show the kind of the level of support that's being generated on campus for, you know, these issues and your commitment in particular.
We may not have it.
Oh, really? Okay, well. If we don't have it, we don't have it, but that's not important. Let me move on then. Kind of in response to the question we had about, you know, whether or not this really was a thing that raised the level of debate in the community. It's not only raised the level of debate in the community, it's raised the national debate. And there was an article in the Atlantic Monthly, as I recall. Is that correct, the Atlantic Monthly? Yeah. Anybody want to address that? Because that spoke directly to UCSC. It spoke directly to students' ability to commit themselves to free speech and speaking out on these issues.
Yeah, I think it also, did a good job at pointing out the hypocrisy of the school's slogan, the original authority on questioning authority. I mean, that is quite clearly a marketing strategy. The school is capitalizing on this radical tradition, and in practice, though, is exactly repressing that. So,
yeah, I mean, this is a school that has as one of its most prominent professors, Angela Davis, who is a Black Panther and involved in these movements in the 60s, and is one of the foremost scholars on prison abolition work and on police violence, and has been recently writing a lot of stuff about that. And yet when students take action around that, the immediate around these same issues that Professor Davis is talking about, there's this immediate repression. And so the school is able to profit off of having these ideas, but they're very, very opposed to actually seeing people put them into practice, and in ways that they fear might challenge them.
We might have a call. Let's see here. Hello, you're on CTV with Highway 6.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. You have a question for one or any of the panelists?
Yeah, well, first off, I wanted to say, as a student and community member in Santa Cruz, I really wanted to express all the support that I have for the action that took place. It was an incredibly powerful and inspiring one. I think it's helpful to remember that this took place in the past. It happened in 2010. Hundreds of students shut down Highway 880 close to Oakland in protest of tuition hikes, at a moment where Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger not only had to refund hundreds of millions of dollars back to the University of California, pointing to the disruptive activity that students were causing. It was also a tactic that was kind of used again when a tuition freeze was won back in 2012. So I'm hoping the students in the Highway 6 can kind of ask, do they think there's a relationship between the disruptive activity that they took part in and the now 2% tuition freeze, or this rather 2-year tuition freeze that's been implemented by Napolitano and Governor Brown? Do they think that the highway action, along with other things that took place across California, was a part of winning that?
Very good question. Thank you so much for calling in. And Rosa, you did mention the tuition freeze. Why don't we speak to that just for a
well,
moment?
I mean, this was, when the tuition freeze was announced, all the students got an email from Janet Napolitano. But that day, when in the San Francisco Chronicle, the article on that freeze ended with reciting specifically our protest on the highway and that Thursday of the same week when students shut down the entire campus. And I think that was something that was directly in the mind, and the similar actions that have been happening across the state were foremost in the minds of Janet Napolitano and Governor Brown when they were trying, negotiating this, because they're being forced to to pay attention to students, and they're trying, and this was not that this freeze was completely a victory for us, because it was I think it's a recognition that by them that we do have a voice and that they have to pay attention to us, but at the same time it's a freeze on tuition for in-state students, but out-of-state students are now facing an 8% tuition increase, and there's other restructuring. I don't know if other people want to talk more
Ethan,
about.
I know you were quoted in a City on a Hill press article about this. Tell us about
I would love to
views.
speak more on this. Rosa, you point out some really good things. I think it's really important to also note that the way that Janet Napolitano presented this to the students, is they presented it as kind of like a victory, like we won. Of course, they didn't ever address, or Napolitano herself never addressed student activists. She said, like faculty and students in general helped win this victory. But we have to understand that Governor Brown, nor Napolitano, nor any of the regents, ever wanted this to happen out of like the compassion and the kindness of their hearts. This freeze wasn't won because they care about students. I think that's really clear at this point. It was won because people spoke up and rejected it and dissented it. And I think, obviously student activists did a lot, but there were so many different tactics that were used over the past year, rejecting these fee hikes that really won this,
Yeah, I think.
Sophia?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear what Brown and Napolitano's positions are on this. You know, otherwise, I don't think we would have been faced with a tuition freeze. But this is also, you know, a reoccurring problem, like you were referencing earlier. This the fight against tuition hikes is not new and has been, you know, students have fought this in the past before, and with the City on the Hill article as well, addressing the tuition freeze. Yeah, I mean, it is not a victory. However, it does recognize the successes of student activism, and I think it makes a strong case for more students to get involved with the movement. And I mean, you know, the way to fight repression is with more active voice against it.
Lori?
Yeah, I definitely think there is a connection between our action and the tuition freeze, but we are definitely not solely responsible for that happening. Students have been arrested, you know, up and down the state because of this, at regents meetings. You know, one of our fellow banana slugs was arrested in Washington, D.C. when the budget was being passed in the House of Representatives out there. So we're just one small part. We're 6 students in a larger sea of people who are drowning right now. And we really just need to recognize, and everyone needs to recognize, that we're not alone in this. We're speaking for a lot of people who can't be speaking right now.
But nevertheless, you know, your activism, in my view anyway, has raised the level of public debate, you know, not only in our community, which really is tied in many ways to UCSC, and so it's difficult for them, I think, to separate out the actions. And we have another call. Hold on. Hi, you're on CTV with the Highway 6. You have a question?
Hi, yes. This is Betsy Phillips, and I just wanted to say, wow, what a scoop, getting the actual protesters on live TV. So congratulations on that. And I wanted to ask the students, you know, most of the people that I hear and listen to out there in the public do not think that this was the way to protest, that they think it was really going to work against them. So I was wondering, do they get a lot of flack from people out there, and how do they handle it?
Okay, thank you, Betsy, and our best to Charlie.
Okay, thanks.
Responses?
I mean, I think there's been a, you know, it's definitely been a, you know, been a polarizing thing where people have been, you know, been at once, you know, there's been a lot of support, and there's also been, you know, a lot of anger. And I think that one of the things that has been, you know, keep in mind is that when there's, you know, an inconvenience caused by this, it's, and this is something that also there was a lot when people had a while ago in Oakland a BART shutdown, you know, against police violence, is that the inconvenience of, you know, a few hours of traffic is very small in comparison to the inconvenience of people getting pushed out of their education, of people, you know, facing, you know, huge amounts of violence against their communities. You know, there's these very, you know, like larger issues that I think, yeah, the debate over tactics gets a little bit, you know, in the way of, when we say this is, you know, these are things that are really hurting people, and that, you know, how we make change is by taking action, even when that, you know, even when that causes inconvenience. That's how, you know, change gets made. You know, if you're going to march in the street, that means you're going to block the, you know, you're going to get in the way of traffic. If you're going to, you know, take action, that does mean some level of inconvenience, but it's a necessary inconvenience if we want to, you know, end violence against people of color and make, you know, education free.
And I think I'll just briefly mention that there is historical context to that as well. Because the civil rights movement was begun by Martin Luther King and people blocking highways and blocking bridges and inconveniencing people because the issues were so important. The issues were so large that they really needed to have the scope that really makes people appreciate that this is an important issue and you really should pay attention to what is going on. Here we have another question from the audience. Please step up.
Hi. I was just going to ask about your role as a student related to what actually you were just discussing. Because, you know, like Rudy said, that they have the ideas, but they don't put them into practice. But I think that that's really ingrained in the institution itself. So there's a lot of real, I don't know, like separation between communities and students, even though I feel it's a false dichotomy. How do you figure your role as a student moving forward, actually putting these ideas in practice, and actually, you know, obviously really care about these things and are doing stuff with the community, and I don't know, yeah.
Thank you, Carl. Appreciate the question. Anyone want to respond to that?
Well, as a student, you know, my education's being delayed right now, so I can't really say what my role is going to be when I'm finally able to return back to UC Santa Cruz. But I know that when I continue to see something going wrong, I'm still going to say something. You know, I'm still going to speak out, and I'm still going to say things. And I think it's important that we all do that as students and as people who really want to see these ideas being implemented. You know, it's a lot of talk to say that we're against sexual assault, but you know, when we're seeing it happen in real life at the bar downtown, you know, there were 2 instances of you know, of queer bashing and things that happened downtown this weekend. When we see those things happening, are we just going to go back to our drinks, or are we going to, you know, take a stand and say that this is not okay? So I think every day there's opportunities to put these ideas into practice, and even if we can't be on campus, we're still going to be out in the world, you know, making these ideas into reality for us.
And I think certainly that the 6 of you, as Andrew included, have become, you know, kind of lightning rods for that anti-repression thing that you really need to do. But in your view, how has it affected the general student body? You know, because you certainly have not been able to be on campus, but from your impression, from talking to the people you know on campus, has their freedom of speech been chilled by what's happened to you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say that it has. I mean, you know, the university's tactics have, in many instances, or many cases, worked. You know, people are afraid to stand up and take action. But fortunately for us, this has been a very it's been a learning experience, and you know, we've been facing repression from the state and from the university for months now, and it's been very difficult to overcome that. But because of it, we're learning so much, and we're definitely going to, you know, pass on that knowledge upon returning to the university. And I think that's like the, you know, the role that we're going to be taking.
Let me see if there's another CTV Highway 6. You have a question for them?
Yes, I do.
Okay, please ask it.
Sure. So, my name is Maga. I'm a community member and student, and a supporter of the Highway 76. And I was actually one of the people that was, you know, like one of the students that went to support kind of on the sidelines, like make sure that everything, you know, was as safe as it possibly could be, like, you know, doing observation stuff. But one thing that I really noticed, there was a big difference between what I observed and how it was reported in the mainstream media. And I think that's an issue of, like, representation. So on that note, I'm really thankful for that, you know, shows like this one exist. And I guess, my question to the 6 is, like, how do you feel like you were represented maybe in the mainstream media? And then given that this is an opportunity for you all to speak on your own behalf and represent yourselves through this amazing opportunity, what is maybe like one thing that you would say to the public and to your supporters that you didn't get a chance to say maybe because of the way you were represented?
Thank you very much for that. Anybody want to respond to that?
Well, so I think that, you know, especially because of our ongoing criminal case, we're, you know, painted as criminals. However, I think that because of so much focus on us, there has been, the media has lost sight of the reasons why we took this action. And, you know, so that's a real issue of representation, I think, too, the fact that we are represented by the media as criminals instead of students who saw these very real issues as very, very, very serious things that are just plaguing our society currently.
Ethan?
Yeah, I'd like to just like add on to that and say like the media is like, you know, obviously very selective with what they choose to show. they use a lot of images of us like smiling. They use a lot of really aggressive words. I think the university and the media has been presenting us in this, I mean, like Sophia said, like criminals, but like in this really violent, kind of aggressive way, which is just so inaccurate when you like really think about it. We're just like sitting down in a highway and we're like immobile, like we can't like move our arms. I just want to add on what Sophia is saying, and like the media and the university are presenting us as criminals very intentionally. It's because they're trying to hide the facade that they're the real criminals.
I'd also like to add that, students are workers too. We're out there every day on the grind. There are students that are having to leave their families behind to go to work every day, and there's a lot, people are putting a lot of effort into making us seem like that we're just spoiled brats who don't know what it's like in the world. I was in the workforce for over a decade, working in public education. I did community college for a really long time, and while working at the same time, I've struggled. I've had my house foreclosed on. I've been laid off. So these struggles that are happening, across our state and across our country, these are struggles that we've experienced personally within our families, within our friends. So we're not just spoiled students. We're students who really care and are really just, taking action on what's really important in our lives.
Marissa?
Oh.
Well, I guess I wanted to talk about, people were very upset, and obviously the way that the media represented us as like being really joyful and happy to be there on the highway and like just carefree and very selfish individuals, just fed, everyone was very polarized by this action, and it just fed those people that were very upset. And I think, people that were inconvenienced, the inconveniences that they faced are highlights of what is inherently just wrong with this system. And, instead of being angry at the people who are deciding to dissent and take action against it, it's very important to try to understand or see the position that you're in and why it's so, why you're so upset, and yeah.
And I think that people may have the impression that the institution really has been able to repress student First Amendment rights, repress their ability to speak out. We do have a clip from Stevens Dining Hall that I think everybody should see, that there is real committed activism that's taking place on campus right now.
Yeah.
Someone who is a violent perpetrator is allowed to still be on this campus. And we're here. You
And of course, Lori reminded me of that Stevenson Cafe, not Stevenson Dining Hall, but you can see that there is still a level of great commitment and engagement on campus about political affairs, and particularly the Student Code of Conduct, which you all were charged under, in fact, which is really selectively enforced against students who are speaking out.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had friends come to me and say that they're scared to go to rallies because they don't want to get suspended. They don't even want to put out art pieces that are critical of the university. I've had TAs tell me that they have students now who are asking them to contact them on non-university emails because they have private information they don't want, they don't want the university to know, and they don't want to be suspended.
Let's try to get one more. You're on CTV with the Highway 6. You have a quick question?
I just wanted to send a shout out to all of the Highway 6. Thank you for your activism. Thank you for your commitment. And you know what? You just, keep doing what you're doing, because obviously when you piss people off, you're being effective and you are getting the attention that you deserve. And then just really try and, stay on the message and don't let them get you down. And I guess I just want to say thank you as a SLUG alum who certainly caused his share of trouble more than once.
Thank you.
Just, Gonzo Gomez, keep it up.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
No problem. And shout out to Charlie Phillips.
Great. Thanks again. And before we get to the end of the show, and we're reaching that, I know that each of you has faced some financial hardships as a result of this, as a result of your activism. I know that you have a GoFundMe campaign going to kind of, maybe generate a little bit of income to help you get along. I'm hoping that we have that. We'll have that on the show as a lower third, but people can go to GoFundMe.com. And I'm hoping that we'll get a graphic up at some point before the end of the show. There it is. Yeah. So, if you really, tell us about, briefly about, what you've had to sacrifice and just to be able to speak out.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been, we were, 4 of us, me included, were made homeless because we were living on campus when we were suspended, and we lost our access to the food on campus and our health care. And so, and I was describing before the violations of due process that the university has had. So we're trying to fight that and hoping to actually sue the university so that we can set a precedent of this not being able to happen again with this huge level of repression and of denying students due process. But we've had graciously lawyers helping us who have been not been able to be paid, pretty much anything. Who have been. And
you can mention a name if you like.
Shout out to Linda Regas,
yes,
who's
indeed.
been doing incredible work for nothing. But so we're, trying to sue the university, but unfortunately that takes money. And so when we're trying to, set a precedent of students being able to speak out without facing repression, and so that's what we're raising money so that we can. Pay lawyers to make that happen and to really, use this not just to be this one instance of political action, but to allow students to continue to take action in the future. Because we have this 2-year tuition freeze, but right after that that's just 2 years, and then tuition's going up again, and students need to continue organizing and continue taking action against that. And community members, need to continue supporting students
we've got a couple of minutes left, so just around this horn here, just a couple of words to your supporters or what you see is happening in the future.
Yeah, I see the tuition freeze as simply, a 2-year period where students across California can mobilize themselves to get ready for the next tuition hike, and ultimately to get tuition back to how it was in 1965.
Lori?
I just really want to thank specifically the sociology department, my department up at UCSC, who's been very supportive, writing lots of letters and getting the word out there. And I just want to say happy graduation to all of my colleagues that will be doing that in a couple weeks.
Sophia?
Yeah, I guess the tuition freeze is, it shows the success of student activism. However, doesn't solve the reason why we were protesting. So, I just would, like to make a call to students to, start building a movement.
Absolutely.
Russell? I think one thing I want to just bring up really quickly is,
we've only got a minute, sorry.
That right now there's people in Oakland. There was recently a ban on nighttime protests, so people are continuing to fight against the repression there of protesting there. And so, this is something that is continuing on and is, not just in Santa Cruz. It is a much larger issues.
Janine?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to all the students who've been really helpful these last few months after this action, and everyone who partook in protests in general, and also obviously thank you to Linda Regas. She's been amazing and super helpful.
And to Steve.
And to Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
And
Well,
several
thank
other
you,
community members that have been
Thank you
very
all
helpful.
for being here. Thank you for your courage and your commitment. This is the kind of thing that our community needs more of and not less of. I think you have raised the level of public debate on this issue. I think that this program has maybe given the community an opportunity to see the issues rather than simply the action. And if we've been able to accomplish that, then it's been successful on all levels. I want to thank everybody for tuning into this segment of Voices from the Village. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, hopefully with Charlie Phillips, to be covering some other very important issues. But I will say in closing, show up, stand up, and speak up, because this is your community, it's your nation, it's your world. Let's make it better. This is Steve Plach, and good night for now. And we should just be talking and having. So thank you all for being here.